Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live session. As always, super excited to be back and be chatting with the community. We're we're keeping it going in a pretty slow 2023, and part of what we'll discuss today and chat about today is we'll talk a little bit about what is the future state of hiring and will these layoffs continue into 2024. And so remember, or maybe you don't remember because this is your first time here, but if this is your first time here, we are just going to use the topic of the live session for our sleepy or down times during these lives. And I've noted this in pretty much every live session, especially over the last 3 to 6 months, that it's been super sleepy in 2023. And that's just because the pace of tech hiring is down about 75 to 80% this year, give or take. And obviously, the layoffs have caused roles to completely not be hired for. And then, of course, based on geography, like especially if we look at the European market, for example, in big tech, it's been absolutely super slow. So, as you're coming into the live session, it's always nice to get those warm and fuzzies. Let me know where you're visiting from online. Just say hello. And of course, any and all questions are on the table for today's discussion. So we'll really cover anything. And again, the concept or the title of the live is just intended for me to chat about that during our downtime. And we will have a little bit of downtime during these sessions. So couple things I want to highlight before we dive in. Usually there's like 4 or 5 minutes warm up while we're getting people to come onto the live session. But let's just talk about yesterday's video. I think that yesterday's video, I'm back to doing a regular cadence of videos on every single Monday. So I've been doing a lot of like question and answer videos. They're not getting a lot of views, but if you go into them and watch them, just remember there's value for anybody in any role. But let's just talk about yesterday's video. I was shocked. I Googled, how would you explain something technical to somebody that is not technical? And I run the searches to just change the words up in Google a little bit, but one of the hits had 11.5 billion returns. That's almost double of what Tell Me About Yourself had returned. It was just shocking to see how many people were interested in this subject. So that's why I did a video on it yesterday. It's kind of catered to somebody who's technical speaking to a non-technical audience, but with all the question and answer videos, you can see just the depth, the level of detail I like to go into in my answers, and I'm always trying to be as creative as possible. So yesterday we made the analogy of an airport, but there's a number of different analogies you can make when you're trying to explain something technical to somebody who's non-technical. If you haven't had a chance to watch that video, definitely check it out. The other item that sometimes I forget to mention is you can watch me on 2x. I want the audience to get really comfortable, if you can, listening and learning on 2x. The value of that is twice as much content. So, like all my Audible business books that I listen to everything on 2x because now 1x is super slow and I am low and slow. So, if you want to ingest more of my content, try picking up the speed. You'll notice that it really does not change anything. And sometimes when you're speaking on video, you just tend to slow down a little bit. I'm going to do a quick prompt to my services and then we'll dive in. And yeah, again, it's been slow. So please, any questions, just throw them out there. Even if they seem ridiculous, there are no ridiculous questions. Well, maybe there are, but throw them in there anyway. If this is your first time here, my name is Jeff H. Sipe. My business is practiceinterviews.com. I do one-on-one interview coaching, one-on-one negotiation coaching, and then I have an interview mastery course. I'm going to start sharing that I'm headed into early stages of development of an AI job interview practice tool. It will be the best tool out there. I can guarantee that. It's just not been developed yet. It's going to come out late fall, early winter. I'm definitely shooting for 2023 to have it released, but we'll just see. Dev takes a little bit of time. But I've put a lot of work into building the back end of it, specifically with Chat GPT. So I'm super excited. If you like what I'm doing today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, I do go live 10 a.m. Pacific time every single Tuesday. And then I do original content every other Monday. I think I'm probably going to take next Monday off because it's Labor Day here in the US. Um, let's get into it. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, Dawn, San Jose, California, my old stomping grounds. I lived downtown, San Jose for 5 years. Georgia, welcome. How is hiring going in Europe, especially London? Not super well. I mean, not super well in tech. So we get a pretty good pulse of what's going on in Europe, and I can tell you all the trends. I feel all the trends on my end in my business, right? And so for me, especially, typically take weekend clients every Saturday and Sunday morning. And so often those Saturday and Sunday morning clients were London, Dublin, Paris, Zurich, Munich. That's I mean, I get them, but it's very, very slow. All tech hiring across Europe has been slow. We've seen London be, in particular, very, very slow. There was a note in the Slack community about almost no job openings at Google in Germany. We've even seen some of the less expensive markets like Warsaw not really hiring. I haven't heard a lot of hiring in Dublin either, and Dublin's kind of like that tech-friendly, tax-friendly hub. So it's just been really, really slow, and I think it's a good prompt to if we're not seeing the job openings now, we would really need to see an uptick in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, that hiring's probably going to delay till next year. Here's the one piece of good news. When we look at hiring and think historically what hiring looks like in Q4, it's a little different than what people think. Specifically, September, October, and November oftentimes are the heaviest hiring months. Why? For hiring managers, use it or lose it, right? So the money was budgeted early in the year. If it hasn't been spent, they need to make that hire or they'll lose the opportunity. So we should see a little bit of an uptick in hiring. Hopefully, London's included there, but we should see an uptick in hiring over the next 3 months, especially. Obviously, December gets pretty sleepy. Maybe the first or second week in December, there's a little bit of a push. And I can tell you, I've seen an uptick in August. So the uptick is just me seeing more clients coming in and needing interview coaching specifically and negotiation coaching. So I have seen it pick up a little bit. So hopefully that's a good trend. That's kind of how I keep a pulse on it. I know that was long-winded. I hope it helps. There's no 2x speed for this. Uh, there is, but on the replay. Obviously, when I'm going live, you can't speed me up. Unfortunately, if you want to speed me up, but always on any YouTube video or any live replay, you can 2x me. Hi, from New York at Accenture. I've heard about some of those programs. Sounds super interesting. Awesome. Thanks for being here. Hi from Michigan. Okay, cool. We got a good US based audience today. Any tips? Any tips on talking to hiring managers interview? How should I proceed? I'm going to have you come back and just re-ask the question. Tips on talking to hiring managers interview. So is this tips on how to handle the hiring manager interview or questions you should ask a hiring manager during the interview? If you can just come back and clarify, happy to answer that question. Hey, Hunter, I start my apprenticeship with Amazon in a couple weeks, and I have a call with my manager before my first day. Any tips on how to approach it? Yes, just super positive, right? Just be super positive, super friendly. You know, the biggest thing we're trying to learn when we start any role, whether that's an apprenticeship, an internship, a full time role, is like, how can we get the most out of it to contribute and provide value for the entire team? So you might just ask your manager, what are your expectations and how can I come in and make this big meaningful impact quickly? I just want to make sure that I hit the ground running. But ultimately, it's in an apprenticeship, they're going to really be showing you the ropes and walking you through it. The biggest thing in those conversations is to go in with a real positive tone so that they get really excited about you coming into the conversation. I hope that helps. If you have more questions, please let me know. Google India has a significant number of open positions. Yeah, I've heard a little bit of a pulse on that. That the market in India looks pretty good, and that's obviously good news. We just want to see an uptick in any and all markets, right? Any and all markets. It'd be nice to see tech hiring a little bit more. And again, I just get that feeling and I get a little bit of that pulse, but only time will tell. And of course, it's just going to be so market specific and dependent. And any of the smaller markets, it's going to be hard to see a lot of roles. Obviously, just a little bit of common sense, right? Found a hiring manager slash recruiter on LinkedIn for a role I want to apply to. They say in their bio, apply, then message me. What would be a good intro message after applying to the role? Great question. Now that's super cool that they did that. So that's something that I don't often see. So apply, and then in that message, you should be highlighting why you're a good fit for the role. Like 3 to 5 bullets for, hey, I believe I'm a good fit for the role for the following 3 to 5 reasons. And really short and concise bullets, right? You want to make sure that message is very succinct, no spelling errors, make it very clean, very friendly. Then you'll also include the best email address to reach you, the best phone number to reach you, and you'll provide your availability. And you can even link your resume into that message. Why are we taking all these steps? They're going to have all this stuff through the application. You're just trying to make it easier on them. And you can even say that, hey, just to make it easy for you, here's my email, here's my phone number, and I just reattach my resume for ease, so that they don't have to jump from one system to another system. They're just looking at it all through LinkedIn. We want to make things as easy on our audience as possible. And it's just kind of the forgotten data point. We always have to put ourselves in our audience's shoes. And this is just kind of a communication area that I see could use a lot of work. I hope that helps. You can increase the playback speed on lives, just use the browser. Okay. Yeah, and again, I don't know enough about about speeding me up during these live sessions. I don't really know how that would work, but that will show my non-technical brain. But again, on the replays, you can watch everything 2x. And even when I go back and I want to watch one of my old videos, I mean, I definitely watch it all on 2x, and everything I consume again on Audible is 2x. I found it to be very valuable just because I can consume twice the content. And when they first start speaking, it sounds really fast, really fast, really fast, but then your brain just really adapts and adjusts really quickly. If you feel like it's so fast, just listen to it on 2x for 1 minute and you'll find, oh, wow, my brain adjusts pretty quickly. Okay. Yeah. So we did cover this question, but let's just double down on it. How is hiring going in Europe, especially the Netherlands and Poland with big tech or financial services? Now, financial services, I don't have as much of a pulse on that, right? Now, Warsaw is the market. I haven't had a lot of tech clients for like Amsterdam, but for Warsaw, I have. And I just, my pulse is that Warsaw is slow. Again, big tech is just going to be slow across all of Europe, but I don't have a great pulse on financial services. I think all hiring feels a little slow right now across the board. Hi, thanks for being here. Jeff's rate of speech is fine, makes us feel the gravity of what he's saying. Thanks. Yeah, and I mean, I'm intentionally slow. So some of you may know, or some of you may not know, I'm from the Northeast in the US, specifically Boston. We're known to talk a little fast, and so my pace has slowed down over time significantly. And that is very intentional. Even at Google, my colleagues used to make fun of my pace a little bit, all in good fun, of course. But I do pause. I do build in space just so that people can understand what I'm saying. And going slow can be an effective way to communicate with others. But yeah, if you want to 2x me, you can. Okay. So we're talking about an offer. Offer 193K base and 420K in equity for 4 years for an L5 UXD and NYC, 360K TC. what could I expect as a refresher each year? UXD, okay, so 360, L5. Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe able to push that equity up a little bit. You may be capped. I think that base is definitely probably capped. They could go up to like 198. They're not gonna eclipse 200K. You may be able to push up that equity or get a sign on. You might be able to get closer to 400 because UX designers are hot, but a total comp year one 360. That's a good offer. Refreshers are intended to keep you up. So build the model. You can just go to practiceinterviews.com, download the offer template, and build in what's going to keep you flat or keep you increasing over time. So if I'm kind of thinking about these numbers out loud, like maybe the refresher grant is in the low to mid ones. So, like, let's say 150K. Now, of course, if you're joining now, you're not going to get that refresher till 2025. So, it also can be valuable to model it out on a yearly basis. Like, we're not actually waiting 2 years on the refreshers, right? We're going to wait a year and 4 months to get those refreshers. Something in that range, though, the low to mid ones would be what I would expect. And then when you model it out, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to fall off of a cliff in those last two equity years of 20% and 10%. Also, you should factor in a promotion during that time to go from a 5 to a 6. The bonus target will go up to 20%. Google doesn't lose employees, and again, just based on these numbers, I'm assuming that this is Google. I don't think the reason why Google doesn't lose a ton of employees, now people move, of course, it's big tech, people move around, but comp over time, Google's hard to beat, especially if you do a good job, you get promotions, those refresher grants will hold you up. Okay. I hope that helps. How have technical interviews changed since Chat GPT can answer LeetCode questions? I don't know. It's a great question. I'm not sure um, how things have changed. The other thing will be really interesting is how people are able to maybe integrate eye contact tools into interviews. Now that can get a little weird because the eye contact tools, I don't know if anybody's seen these, but basically you're looking here, but it will move your eyes here. So we could, I imagine in a not too distant future, maybe currently or within the next few months, you might be able to interview and literally be reading off a script, throw it into Chat GPT and say, "Give me a second to answer that." The only challenge is that the eye contact stuff will always lock in and it won't move. So always locking in and staring at your interviewer, that's not great either, right? But ChatGPT and these AI tools and generative AI is changing everything, including the interviews, right? So it's just something to that we need to be keeping in mind and keeping a pulse on. Yeah, but I'm not sure how these companies are protecting against ChatGPT because it's going to be hard for me not to be utilizing a second screen, plugging in an answer, getting some ideation. Even in 1 minute, I can get some sort of kickback. It's just the reading off of the script that will be difficult. So I don't know. It's going to be challenging. And this is something that we can double down on because, AI is going to change everything in the job market. Everything in our lives is going to totally change because of AI. And I think that the people who are watching this live, they get it. Like this audience gets it, but a lot of people are not really aware of how different their lives are going to be, not only now, but in the future because of AI. What's a realistic comp? L5 senior motion designer in LA area at Google. Advertised salary at 130 to 208. All right, Max. So yeah, like one of the biggest things that I just hope this audiences gets and that I just want you to share with your friends or people who are looking at big tech roles, like, right, they're just advertising the base salary and equity plays such a big role. The bonus is guaranteed. We get sign-on bonuses. So realistic comp, probably on the advertised salary range, you're in LA, which is one of the most expensive markets. So it's like a premium market, right? So you probably get up to like 175, maybe 180, maybe higher, but they're not going to pay the very top end of the range 208. That's going to be reserved for New York and the Bay only. So maybe you even approach 200K, but you won't max out because that number again will be targeted for those markets. Now, senior motion designer, design's pretty hot right now. You should definitely be making total comp, base, bonus, equity sign on. You should be making into the low to mid threes. And I would definitely be anchoring in the fours for sure. Obviously, I have negotiation services if you need help, but that's my recommendation. Let me know if you have more questions. When does tech companies start interviewing on site instead of online? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. I haven't really. I've heard whispers of some of like the smaller startups and tech companies doing some in-person stuff. I've even heard of big tech like doing informal meetings, like coffee chats, doing those in person. So one of the most interesting things to note is, even in 2013, when I started at Google, there were quite a few on-site interviews that would have at least one video interviewer. So this has just been kind of a common practice for a lot of companies where they may want somebody to interview you from New York, but you're in San Francisco and you're doing some interviews with live people and some maybe one or two via video. I don't know. It's really interesting because I was watching this interesting TikTok last night that was talking about like Europe and how Europe, especially a market like Germany, they're all back to fully on site. But in the US, there's been a major push back against really going back into the office full time. And until people are really back in the office full time, it's probably not going to be convenient to bring people into the office. This is a really, really interesting subject that we'll just have to see because my coaching is definitely adapted for virtual interviews. And then if we go back into the office, the coaching will need to adapt to go back to more of a physical environment. Do you pay much attention to other job markets outside of tech, say finance, consulting, or law? Yes and no. I mean, tech is the world I live in. I love tech. So I mostly keep my pulse on tech. But all I can tell you is that all these other areas are down, right? Like we're pretty much in they don't want to call it a global recession, but if you just see the total number of job openings, especially for the behind the desk jobs, like we're down. And so I keep a pulse on the overall job market. Like even the layoffs that have happened recently, have some of those layoffs, a lot of those layoffs have actually been with non-technical companies. So I do keep a pulse on that, but tech is where I kind of follow the trends, most of the trends. What are the main months where companies have layoffs? We have seen over the last 2 years that there is not one month in particular, right? It's just been when they need to lay off, they lay off. And that could be based on month over month earnings, but we really haven't seen a method to the madness. Of course, some of these layoffs are trying to come before earnings, maybe for public companies, but we haven't really seen a trend. If you look at the big tech company layoffs, they've been across the board, all over the place. Does every job on a resume have to be relevant for the role I'm applying for, such as a software developer applying to a sales? There's a lot of jargon that doesn't make sense. Um, Not all your jobs need to be relevant to the role that you're applying for. No, I mean, usually previous work and previous experience is really going to benefit us, right? We're learning communication skills, strategy, operations, tactical things. So I find value in diverse backgrounds. And even when I went into recruiting, most of my background had been in analytical work, believe it or not. So um, it's okay to have that experience. It doesn't all have to be relevant, but of course, you want to have some relevancy to the role you're applying for or trying to get referred for. Would it be smart to apply now to Google or wait till the end of the year? Now. Now there's actually this is a great question. Let's actually, Ahmad, let's take a step back here. Um, One of the major reasons why you would want to land in a big tech company, let's take Google, for example. If you were to wait till the end of the year to apply, and let's say you get hired in February or March, you're going to have a long wait on those refreshers. Refresher grants are only guaranteed if you work a full year. So the goal is to get in now, get hired now, and so you work all of 2024, and then those refreshers hit the beginning of 2025. Now, I'll just mention something else. You can apply now, but my strong recommendation always is to network. Yes, we should apply. It's low hanging fruit. It will open some doors, but only about 10% of people or less get jobs through online applications. So you should do a mix of applying and networking. Which part of Boston are you from? And did you work in the CAM office? I grew up right outside of Boston, so the Metro Boston area. Um, I so so here's a crazy story, and anybody who's watched these lives, I think that this story is really fun, and so I'll share it with the audience. So I did work out of the CAM office. One of the cool things about Google is that they're really flexible. Like, so I would go home to see my family that's all still in the Boston area, and I'd work out of the Cambridge office like twice a year, usually 2 weeks a year. The craziest part is that I used to work in that building before it was Google. It was MIT's, one of the floors was MIT's technology licensing office. I worked in that department at MIT. This is a long time ago, so we won't talk about how long ago, but I worked there. And so I remember going back the first time to the Cambridge office, and I was in the gym at the Google office, and I was running on the treadmill, and the treadmill was essentially right where my old desk had been. It was just very surreal and very crazy. So 5 Cambridge Center, where that was, I worked there at MIT for a couple of years, and then I came back years later as a Google employee. Very, very surreal, but fun story. Have you heard any rumblings about Google moving to 100% video only interviews re-COVID? Onsite was just moved to all virtual, and they said it was for the safety of the team. GCP, bad sign. Okay, so um, I'm a little confused by the question. It's not a bad sign. All these interviews have been virtual for 3.5 years now. It's been a really 3.5 years. Does that sound right? Has it been that long? It's been a long time. So it's not a bad sign for the safety of the team. Sure. So this is kind of the pulse of, will they go back to in-person interviews? And it's hard to know. Jeff, what's a good anchor for an L6, InfraMod CE and NYC? CE roles have been interesting from a comp perspective. I've seen some really, I've seen the comp. This is kind of crazy. The comp for these roles I've seen for my clients has gone down just a little bit. But if I'm going L6, I'm definitely going to anchor. I'm definitely going to anchor in the high fives to low sixes. You're probably not going to get there, right? It's probably going to pay somewhere in the fours. I'm hoping that you can get to mid high fours, maybe even up around 500, but I'm probably anchoring in the high fives to low sixes would be my recommendation for total comp. How would you recommend using Chat GPT to rewrite my resume and cover letter to better fit a role? Is there a formula I should use to get a more detailed response? So I'll give you the short answer, and then you can hop over to my YouTube page if you're not already on my YouTube page. And I did a video this year. It's called like Fire Your Resume Writer. So what I really like is taking the job description and your resume, pasting them both into Chat GPT and saying, where are the 3 to 5 areas where my experience aligns well with the role? Chat GPT will spit that back out. Then that becomes your bulleted resume summary. We want to change out our bulleted resume summary, which lands at the top of our resume every single time we apply to a new job. So you're actually saying things where you have that experience, but it aligns well with the job. It will make your resume hit more on keyword searches through ATS systems and will just excite your audience a little bit more about your background. So just something critical to be thinking about. Just play around with it. Cover letters, not a fan. Unless they ask for a cover letter, don't give them one. It's just a waste of time, waste of space. It can be a distraction. And I can tell you, like for big tech companies, they're not reading them. They just don't read them. They don't have the time. Too many resumes coming in. But play around with it. But definitely plug in the job description and resume at the same time and ask it to spit back some data that's going to get good alignment. The biggest thing with ChatGPT is keep asking it questions. What can I do to better inform you for how to help me? So that's how I always kind of utilize ChatGPT. Quick pause. We're at the 30s. I always like to just give a quick prompt at the 30s. If this is your first time here, my name is Jeff H. Sipe. My business is practiceinterviews.com. I do one-on-one interview and one-on-one negotiation coaching. I have an interview mastery course, and I am coming out with an AI practice interview tool. I am very hopeful that the dev will be done before the end of the year. I am confident that I'll be able to demonstrate why this tool is better than the other tools out there, including Google's tool, etc. We'll get into that at a later time. If you like what I'm doing today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, consider subscribing. I go live 10 a.m. Pacific time every Tuesday and new original content every Monday. Hey, Jeff, thanks for your tips and guidance. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Let's go to the second comment. I got a call for a TAM role at Toronto. What comp can I expect as a base? I know we're a little bit behind on your comment from a timing perspective, but I would really need to know the target. I really need to know the target level. I'm pretty useless without the level because the ranges really depend on level. So what level do you think you're at? Are the min years of work experience on a job posting strict? Do I have to be considered for a senior PM or senior TPM that requires 5 years of work experience, but you have 3 years of relevant work experience? Here's the great piece of news. Those minimum, that's not even a word. Those minimum years of experience, it's a suggestion only. But I would tell you, a senior PM or senior TPM, if you have 3 years of experience, I would not qualify that as a senior. And I would be surprised that a job description would only say 5 years for a senior. I would think that would be more like 6 to 8 years, probably leaning more towards 8 to 10 years. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't go after it. We should never be too concerned with the minimum number years of experience. Now, if it asks for 10 and you have 1, of course, but if you're 2 to 3 years off, I say go for it anyway. They will consider you. Okay, we just covered that one. How to best move from project role to product program manager role in an entirely different field. Okay, so great question. Project to program, not nearly as difficult as project to product. Product management is its own thing. It's a beast. It's an animal. It's just a totally different skill set. It doesn't mean that we're not utilizing some of those project management skills, but it's different. Now, program management, project and program managers are often similar. It's just the biggest difference is program's going to be usually longer term, bigger scope, more stakeholders. But I would push towards program management, and then typically program manager skills, they can carry over from one field to another. Project and program manager, you can go from one expertise to another expertise. Now, of course, if they need a strong domain expert, you want to keep that in mind, but I would go after program manager roles. And here's the good news. I think program and product roles are really safe from AI. Those roles are going to be around for a long time. There's just a lot of reasons why AI cannot replace those roles. So those are going to be some of the better roles to be looking at in the near future, in my opinion. The cultural fit interviews are more like a make or break of things while releasing offer letters. What are your views on this topic? Um, I think that all interviews are make or break, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that we can't have one interview that's not as good as another, but a really bad interview is going to be tough to overcome at any organization. If you're not a cultural fit, it is a make or break. So I do totally agree with that statement. Um, from a cultural perspective, when you get into these cultural interviews, just remember positivity is huge. You really just want to reflect in a positive way. It doesn't mean that we don't have failures or mistakes or decisions that we would change. We, of course, we all do. But your way to reflect in a positive manner. And then, of course, anything culturally, you just want to be really friendly and kind. Be really conscious of using and mixing up your gender pronouns. There's just a few things to keep in mind, but just smiley, engaged. And then, of course, in some of these cultural interviews, ask great questions as well. If you have more questions, let me know. Hi from Kansas. How can I address the impact of a layoff after 4 years in my front end developer role, especially when I don't have current projects to showcase in my resume? Additionally, do you have any insights or updates regarding available front end developer opportunities? So, how can I address the impact of a layoff after 4 years? Yeah. So, um, the good news is that layoffs have become so common that we no longer need to worry about them. There's just too many financial impacts on all companies across the board. We could say, I had a fantastic experience at XY Corp. Unfortunately, I was part of a larger layoff due to the recession, due to financial constraints. I'm just so excited to be here right now having this conversation about this role. Um, Insights or updates regarding FE dev roles is I always will kick that back to you. Obviously, you just want to do your research, see what's out there. I think front end is getting to be an interesting space, right? Some of the front end stuff is becoming a little bit more plug and play. So how are you adapting to what's happening on the front end and the changes on the front end? I think will be interesting. And then obviously the impact of AI, all things to consider. But I just don't want you to be concerned about the layoff piece. I think that that's a non-issue right now. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to kick that back to you again. Just um, level is going to be really important. Also, I'll get to every question, so no need to repeat questions. Most good technical interviewers don't ask LeetCode hacker rank questions. A competent technical interviewer can understand your technical ability by having deep conversations about what you've done. Yeah, and I agree with you. The good technical interviewers aren't going to ask LeetCode, hacker rank, whatever these other platforms are, but I don't think most people are good interviewers. Just quite honestly, it's just they don't do it enough. So I just always anticipate an inexperienced interviewer, an inattentive interviewer, and I think that's just a good default mode to go into because it makes us sharper, it makes us more prepared and more adaptable to realizing that most interviewers just aren't good. It's just not something that they do consistently enough to be good at it. To avoid discrimination of age against an application, do you think it's best to remove a graduation date from a resume? 100% yes. 100%. We have to make ourselves look younger. I don't know that everybody loves this feedback, but ageism is a real thing. It exists. It's out there. So how do we make ourselves look maybe a little bit younger than we are, right? We remove our graduation dates. Sometimes we drop off those early career opportunities. So I can tell you right now, I'll be really straightforward. I graduated college in 1999. That is not on my LinkedIn background. And I had experience for 7 years leading up to my experience as an analyst in San Diego in 2006. I dropped off all the earlier experience. I was in banking. I was at MIT, as I mentioned earlier. I had this one recruiting gig that really didn't work out and didn't last long. I didn't keep any of that in my background. And I did all that to make myself appear younger on LinkedIn so that when companies were attracting me, I looked younger. When I started as a recruiter at Google, I was 35. I mean, I was one of the oldest individual contributor recruiters coming in the door. I mean, in the top probably 5% at that age. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. So we just definitely want to scrap out old dates, old positions if we can, because especially in a country like the US, they really can't ask for that data up front. Yeah, they can ask for it on the application on the back end when they're doing a background check, but at that point, they already want to hire you. Great question. What are your thoughts on video post production salaries at tech companies or how these roles could evolve into machine learning or AI? Um, I don't know. We'd really need to get into the weeds of what kind of video post production roles are available at tech companies. I'm not as familiar with the availability of those types of roles within tech. Um, but yeah, machine learning and AI is going to absolutely, it's going to be able to remove a lot of the post production work. Now, not the creativity, maybe, but cleaning up some really basic items is just going to be it's just standard in some of these programs now. So I do see AI having a huge impact. AI is going to have a huge impact and already has had a huge impact in the creativity fields, right? So we're just going to see more of that. But in terms of salaries, tech obviously pays well. Now, if you're going to a smaller startup that needs these, it's going to be very base and potentially bonus focused. And then obviously big tech's going to be the mix of base, bonus, and equity. I don't know if that really answered your question, but I hope it helps. Okay. Now we got it. Okay. So the TAM role in Toronto for L5 or L6, will your last year's interview influence that? So for a TAM role, a base for an L5, L6 in Toronto. Remember, the base salaries are low. TAM is, even though it's a technical role, it's a little bit lower paying. It falls it falls a little bit more in line with less technical roles from a comp perspective. So in Toronto, I would imagine a base salary for L5 to L6 being in the 150 to 200K range. That might even be a little bit high. It might be like 140 to 180. Is moving from a senior solution architect to a TAM role at Google, or should I target for a different role? Well, if you can get in as an architect, like if you could get in as an architect for GCP, the good news about that is that architects have a sales component to it. So it's a 42.86 bonus target. So if you can go in as an architect, it's definitely going to pay better than a TAM role. But obviously, I'm a big fan of getting into big tech companies for the money, for the experience, and obviously for the brand. So if you're trying to break in the door to big tech and TAM's the way to do it, I would say do it. To answer the question for this session, in 2024, I don't expect a massive layoff, but there will be layoffs, of course. Technically, I see big tech companies and AI leaders reach their steady state and now looking to the future for how to improve and maintain their systems. About ourselves, we need to stay ready in our on-demand skills and reskill our skills. Yep. Like drop skills and no longer being required to replace those that AI can do for us and then enhance any required skills. Yeah, I mean, we can treat the new normal with AI with fear, or we can treat it with excitement and an opportunity to utilize it to our benefit. Let's choose the latter, right? It's here, it's not going away. And anyone who believes that it won't replace jobs, it will. It will. The pace is only going to get faster every single day. So think about how far we've come since Chat GPT really did their big launch in like November. We've come pretty far. Many of us on this live, I mean, I use Chat GPT multiple times a day, every single day. A year ago, I wasn't using it at all. right? So that's just one AI tool. I've actually implemented a few AI tools in my business already this year, but it's going to learn quickly. And so we just need to adapt and adjust to that. And anything else, I do a lot of LinkedIn polls on whether people think they're going to lose their job, et cetera. And it's just shocking to me. People don't think it's going to impact their jobs. They don't think that there's going to be layoffs. They think that they're indispensable from a communications perspective. But what do people really care about? They really care about timely responses and just feedback in general. And we live in a world where people want instant gratification. And sometimes humans slow that down, whereas AI can automate and speed things up. I truly believe that almost no position over time is safe. And I think that that's not a negative aspect. It's not a negative perspective. It's just taking that into my reality and trying to adapt and adjust accordingly. And I think we should all do the same thing. How would the market behave in the last quarter of 2023? Again, historically, it's been the biggest hiring quarter because hiring managers are told to use it or lose it because the role is typically budgeted early on in the year or in the middle of the year. So we typically see a good push in hiring. And I can tell you, I am seeing that on my end. August has been the busiest month for me year to date. So that's good news. That's something I want to share with everybody because that's really, really good data point that we're seeing. And I'm seeing more clients. When I see more clients, it means that the market's picking up. So what does that mean? Last year, the first 6 months of last year, I was fully booked with a waiting list. It has not been that way this year. So, but that's when tech was hiring like crazy, right? And so what I'm seeing on my end is I'm just seeing a massive uptick, especially in those people who are booking the interviews. So that just means to me, I'm not like looking at the number of job openings every day. It just means that there's an uptick for sure. Is there a total comp difference in New York and Boston? Yes, it's about 10%. So there's what I like to call, or I guess technically this was the Google term that they used. There's premium markets and then there's premium plus markets. And so the premium plus markets, there's only two of those in the US. It's New York and the Bay Area because those areas are just significantly more expensive than anywhere else in the country. But then you have the premium markets, the markets that are not New York and Bay Area for cost, but they're pretty close, right? So that would be Boston, Seattle, LA, San Diego, maybe Boulder, for example. Those are the markets that are going to be maybe a 10% differential. I did not include DC in there. Cost of living wise, yes, but cost of labor is a little bit lower because of the government jobs. But yeah, it's about a 10% differential, give or take, Boston to New York. So New York will pay 10% more. What does CE mean? CE is a customer engineer role. So it's a client facing role, specifically CE. Anybody mentioning CE in here, that's going to be a customer engineer for GCP, Google's cloud platform, probably. How do I contact you for total comp negotiations? Just go to practiceinterviews.com. You'll see the option for negotiation consulting on there. Thanks. For someone like me who's not really interested in programming or coding, but I still want to get into big tech, applying for the non-technical roles is the best bet. Just how? Some applications, some networking. So we haven't talked about the networking strategy. I have talked about networking forever, right? I talk about it all the time. I can tell you that pretty much all the networking conversations I have, that there's no follow through. And I'll give the advice, but it's not easy work, but it works. The biggest thing when it comes to networking is giving on LinkedIn. And the reason why is that 99.99% of people, when they do reach outs on LinkedIn, they're asking for something. It's very self-focused. And so you want to be different. You want to say, hey, Sue, I came across this really cool article on AI that's very relevant to your business. Just wanted to share this article with you. Have a great day. and that's it. And you are going to do that time and time again with hiring managers, specifically not recruiters, but hiring managers that you identify that potentially could be hiring for roles that you're interested in. Now, non-tech at these big technical companies is like at least half the job. So absolutely go after it. There's no reason that you need coding or programming skills to get into a big tech company. That's just some of the roles are technical. Obviously, a lot of them are non-technical as well. I hope that helps. Thanks, Jeff. Watch the live weekly, and they're so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for being here. What is the real incentive of working for big tech outside of salary, other than say a startup or another field entirely? Brand. Comp is absolutely a big one, but brand is huge. Why am I here? Why is anybody listening to me? Right? If I didn't have the backing of Google when I first started my YouTube channel, nobody would be watching. And I utilized that brand to my benefit, right? And now I truly believe and I'm very confident in my ability to coach people in interview skills and negotiation skills that have nothing to do with me working at Google. But it was a good foundation to build off of. And that brand helped me build the business. And then ultimately, I'm super fortunate to have gained the skill set because people came to get my coaching. So the value of the brand is better than the comp because the value of the brand is priceless. And that's a big reason to go after it. Does it mean you should stay forever? No, I don't think you should. I want everybody to become an entrepreneur. So you have the freedom of being your own boss and you're never capped on how much you can make. In some years, that's great. This year, not so great, right? But I want everybody to get to that place where they work for themselves. But getting a big brand, taking some of those learnings from a big brand can be really valuable as well. Steven, it's been a minute. How are you? You're back and continue to love your content. Been focusing in on transitioning from program management to cybersecurity management within Deloitte. Okay. Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity, like this is just going to be more and more relevant. It will be really interesting to see how cybersecurity evolves and changes because of AI. So I think it's a great move. And stay in touch. It's great to see you. Do recruiters really value an internal reference when reviewing a candidate? Hey, David, it depends. So much of this, I know this is going to sound crazy, and sorry, it's freezing in this office, so I'm getting snotty today. But so here's the thing: like, let's say I'm a Google recruiter. I'm not incentivized as a Google recruiter to run internal references because if it's a bad internal reference, you're going to get shut down as a candidate. So most recruiters would just not do it. Now, an internal reference, it usually isn't going to tip the scale, but if you were going into a company like a Google, you're going in a hiring committee and you had 3 incredibly strong internal references and they were on the cusp, that could be enough to carry you over. So my biggest recommendation is if you are going to utilize internal references or references in general, make good decisions about your references. Just know without a shadow of a doubt that they are going to provide you with positive feedback. This is one that killed me in my career. I got laid off from a job, my first recruiter job in 2005. My manager said that they would provide me with a good reference. And after multiple interviews, great interviews, I kept not getting the job. Well, one of the jobs I applied for was just to work part-time at a bar to make extra money. And of course, the bar didn't have the checks and balances of a normal human resources department. So they gave me my whole folder to fill out some forms. They had done the reference check with that manager and they said I would not be good for the previous role I had been in. So what were they doing? They were killing me behind the scenes. They actually lied to me and were providing a bad reference every single time. Not a cool move, obviously. And so it was totally my mistake, reflecting back, to have trusted that person to give me a good reference. And I was pretty upset with myself that I trusted them because I shouldn't have. I know that I've had a couple fun stories today, but it's just a really, really important data point. Okay. Really know and trust your references, because if you get good internal references, it can tilt the scale, but a bad reference will absolutely shut you out of the process at any big company. You get a bad reference, they're not going to hire you. Is Google still sticking to the 1-year policy for interview results being valid? Team matching has been considerably slowed down. Case by case basis. Yeah, that's what I've seen. They mostly are sticking to the 1-year rule, even with the freeze, but they're doing some case by case basis items. But yeah, team matching's been super slow, so it's not guaranteed. Thanks. Just to elaborate on what program management entails, what would be the real difference from project and typical career progression look like? Um, Elaborate on what program management entails. The real difference between a project and program manager is that program managers tend to be longer. So a project might be a month, where a program might be a year or never ending. It's a scope. Usually projects have smaller scope, programs have bigger scope. Stakeholders, you're likely to have more stakeholders involved in a program than in a project. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have more questions. See, now I think the whole age discrimination would work backwards for me. As a degree apprenticeship, I would graduate the same year and have 4 years of experience, so it'd be a bit odd. Hunter, no, I don't want you to worry about that. We're really talking about age discrimination for people who are older, not younger. Okay, so don't worry about it. Hey Jeff, I have a couple of jobs that I've had only for less than a year. Should I keep them in my resume and LinkedIn, or would it be better not to include them? It really depends on the path, right? Are these filling in the gaps? And there is this idea or concept that job hoppiness is something that companies care about. You might get a stakeholder here or there, an interviewer who cares, but most people understand we live in a world where people move jobs quite a bit. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Regarding cultural fit interviews, why do employers always keep it at the end phase? Even screening checks don't reflect results. Any case studies you can share that were dealt with by your clients on cultural fit interviews? I'm trying to understand a little bit. Cultural fit interviews come in a lot of different facets, right? So sometimes cultural fit is just a part of the interview process, and it should be. Sometimes cultural fit is more informal interviews, more casual chats. Um, there's really no way we can control what a company does and where they bring it into the process, and whether it's formal or informal. What we can control is how we respond. So again, positive pitch and tone, and reflect positively on past experiences. Even if they weren't great, we can focus in on our learnings, how we improved, how we applied those items to be better in the future. I hope that helps. If it didn't answer your question, please let me know. Okay, so we answered that one. Hey, David, it's been a minute. It's been a while. How technical do you need to be for the T for a TPM role? Do you need to know how to code, or is it only about how you think when solving a technical problem? It's the latter. It's pretty common for TPMs to grow up technical, like degree in software engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, for instance. But the T is very domain specific. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to code. There will be some TPM roles where you do need to code and may have a coding interview, but not all of them. It's mostly technical within the domain, but it's going to vary role to role. Are technical program manager roles still in higher demand compared to technical product manager roles at Google? So this is interesting. Google dropped the T from their product manager interviews, and I know why. They couldn't hire anybody because the product manager roles are so hard to pass already. They're probably the hardest interview, in my opinion, at Google. And then they were asking technical questions, and I think people were just bombing. So they've really kind of backed away from technical product. But product is, I want to like be careful of how I'm saying this, but product is probably the hottest role in the world. Product or any kind of dev role that has an AI component, but it's been like that for the last few years. But TPM roles are super hot right now. The salaries and comp for TPM are going way up. So that's the good news. Huge increase in the comp over the last couple of years. So to answer your question, both roles are hot. We're hitting the hour mark. So I'm just going to do a quick prompt on my services and then get back to the questions. My name is Jeff H. Sipe. My business is practiceinterviews.com. I do one-on-one interview coaching and one-on-one negotiation coaching. I also have an interview mastery course, and I am coming out with an AI job interview practice tool. We're just going to be kicking off the dev in September, so I'm hoping to have it out late November, early December. It's going to be killer. I've put a ton of work into it already. I know it's going to be awesome. It just needs to be developed. We got tons of free resources at practiceinterviews.com. You can join our Slack group. You can use those 9 free resources. I need to update the Slack link. Something's wrong with it, so I'll get that updated today. If you like what I'm doing today, smash that like button if you've never subscribed. I go live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time and new original content every Monday. I may take next Monday off because it's Labor Day. I'll definitely let the community know via the YouTube community page. On behavioral interview, they're asking about a situation which you haven't experienced. What to answer? Look for the overarching theme, right? So it may be like a question like, tell me about a time you had a conflict with somebody on the product team. And you're like, oh, I've never had a conflict with somebody on the product team. You would just say to your interviewer, I have had a conflict, but it was somebody on the engineering team. Is it okay if I provide that example? Or if you don't have a conflict with an internal stakeholder, but maybe it was a conflict on a process or strategy, you can say to your interviewer, or fake interviewers always Sue, I do have an example of a conflict. It's not actually with a person, it was more with a process. Is it okay if I share that example? You're looking for the larger theme of the question. In that specific question, it was just how do you handle conflict, right? So it is incredibly important that you slow down, you restate the question, you write it down, and you just tell your interviewer you're going to take a minute to think about it. I did do a video on this. I don't know, it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So if you just go to my YouTube channel, what if I don't know the answer to a question? And I kind of map out the process there, but that's my high level. Do certifications such as a PMP help get more calls for interviews? Probably not. No, I like certifications because I like the learnings, and I like that like something with a basis in PMP can be really valuable. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this. I get hit up for PMP certifications on LinkedIn almost daily. That's a newer thing that's happened over the last 6 months. I don't know why, but I like certifications from a learning perspective and how you can apply them in the interviews. But is it really going to move the needle? Probably not. What are the months of the year which hiring peaks? Again, use it or lose it. So I usually see September, October, and November as being the busiest months historically. I get so many requests on LinkedIn from people who I don't know. Would you advise I accept? So I'm pretty open to connecting on LinkedIn, but I don't connect with people who I believe are trying to sell me a service or who are trying to connect to use my connections so that they can get more second connections. But I tend to be pretty open. You also want to just recognize over time, and I know this is a huge number, but you're capped at 30,000 connections. So that's just something to be aware of. But connect with people who seem to just have a good professional background and likely aren't trying to sell you something. But it is a personal choice how you review and connect with people on LinkedIn. Okay, so got this question before, but let's double down on it. Is Google still sticking to the 1-year policy for interview results being valid? Team matching has been considerably slow. It's a case by case basis, but most people are being locked into a year. There are some outliers, but I've seen more of the year policy. But case by case, especially with people who are really impacted right around that freeze time last July. Our TPM roles, oh, yeah, we answered that question. Should internal reference advocate for you by contacting the hiring manager directly? They can. Yeah, they can. You can say like, hey, this is the hiring manager is Sue Smith. If you want to connect with her and tell her how great I am, you can. Just want to tread lightly with that, depending on where you are in the process. If they're getting to the end and maybe it's between you and one other person, you might want to push on that. We don't know about the human on the other side of that. We don't know the hiring manager will react positively or negatively. Sometimes we just need to push on it and take the risk, but it is a little bit of an unknown. Okay, so you're taking on a little bit of risk by doing it. When starting out, on average, after how many years do promotions occur in big tech? Usually after a couple of years, typically. Now, it depends also like level to level. If you're going L3 to L4, it's probably going to happen faster than an L6 to an L7, for example. But usually a couple of years. Again, each level you go up, we need to add a little bit more time. But classically, a couple of years, 1 year to really learn the role, show you can do the role, and then another year to really be doing the role at the next level to validate that you should be promoted. It's a very, very loose average, but that's what I kind of saw. I have 10 plus years of experience as an engineer and 3 as a SWE. I get a lot of senior JDs, which I don't pretend and suppose they see my LinkedIn profile 13 plus years. Should I adjust my LinkedIn? It's a software engineer. Wait a second. You have 10 plus years of experience as an engineer, a lot of senior JDs, and I pretend I'm a little confused by the question. If you want to come back and restate it. So people are passing you job descriptions that you qualify for, you're overqualified for. I'm a little confused. If you come back, hopefully I can answer your question. Discrimination. One hot topic I've seen recently is prioritizing people currently employed versus unemployed. That's the history of the world. The history of the world. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of always been the case. People with jobs have always been seen as more desirable. Now, I actually think that we're in maybe a little bit of a different place now because like big tech companies laid off a lot of good people. So I don't know that that's as true today, but that's always historically been the case. But it doesn't mean that anybody should value themselves less. If they're currently unemployed. A lot of crazy things happen, and we all go through times of unemployment in our career, and we should go through times of unemployment. It means that we got fired because maybe we were pushing the envelope and doing good things. Maybe we were just impacted by a layoffs. Maybe we had a bad boss and we decided to leave. Consistent tenure throughout our careers maybe never gives us an opportunity to adjust and adapt. It's just a fuzzy, loose statement. It doesn't really mean it needs to be that way, but just my 2 cents. Some companies like Microsoft will list locations associated with a job with up to 100% remote work. Does that mean that they prefer you live near one of those locations but can still work from home? Believe remote is remote, so they're open to anywhere. Are they going to lean and have a preference for somebody who could potentially come into the office? Yeah, probably. But it doesn't mean you need to be close to the office. And then you can always do creative things for these jobs. So I work with a lot of negotiation clients where we need to get really creative about not relocating. So for instance, a lot of the RTO return to office policies are 3 days in the office. So some people will own a home in one state. Let's say you own a home in Texas, but the job's in San Francisco. Well, sometimes I'm encouraging that they get an early flight from Texas, land in on Tuesday morning, go into the office in San Francisco, stay Tuesday and Wednesday night, and then fly out Thursday night. Yes, you incur airplane costs and hotel costs, but sometimes the cost differential to actually move from Texas to San Francisco, for example, it's actually a better price point to fly in on a weekly basis. Obviously, with kids and pets and other things, there's a lot of things to consider. Um, I'm going off on a tangent here, but just one example. Quick question, Jeff. Do paid internships count towards years of work experience? They were in the relevant field at a company that's number one in their industry worldwide. Yeah, I mean, I count internships. That's real work, internships, apprenticeships, even like these rotational programs. Yeah, it all counts. And if I'm looking to hire somebody, and let's say I come across a college graduate that's got three internships totaling 9 months and it's 2+ years of experience for the role, that's somebody I would consider because they're close enough. They've maybe been in one or two or three different environments, diverse backgrounds, right? So definitely something I would consider. I absolutely count internships as work experience. Where do you get your data from in terms of job demand, salary, etc.? Um, so I've negotiated, I mean, if you include all my experience, I mean, I've negotiated a lot of offers. So I just have kind of a pulse on the market, whether it's Google or Meta or Amazon or Apple. I kind of Salesforce. I know just offhand in my mind, I've just dealt with it so many times. It's just I know the market. Um, I do think if you're trying to go into tech, that levels.fyi is a decent resource. It's decent. There are some inaccuracies there, which I really don't understand, but it's a good enough resource to get a gauge. So I like that as a tool. I think some of the other stuff like Glassdoor and salary.com, like those are not great resources, especially not for big tech. But mine's just based on experience. I kind of know and have a pulse on the market, and that's just like anything that anybody does, right? If you've done it a lot, you kind of just know. I hope that helps. I cleared all the rounds at Google and at last they told me they had to freeze hiring for the time being. Will they reach out again? Okay. Um, yes. Yeah. I mean, if you clear all the rounds, if you pass all the rounds, the way I like for people to visualize it, and I'm sorry that that happened to you, but the way I like for people to visualize it is you basically say, okay, there's you, Sue, Jane, and Bob. You're four potential candidates for a new role that pops up, but Sue, Jane, and Bob all applied. Well, I have data on you. I have good interview feedback on you. I'm always going to go with the good feedback. Always, 100% of the time, because it's data. So I'm always going to take and show a preference to the people who have good interview feedback over the people who have no feedback. It's just an advantage. You should hear from them again. I would definitely expect it. Hey, Jeff, finally got through all the interviews for data center manager, L6. Recruiting and hiring manager said I was at the edge to L6, but it wasn't enough, more like a strong 5. Okay. We'll go to H. Okay, we'll go to HC as a TPM L5 in the next week with the hiring manager backup. If I get approved, we're negotiating salary. How much lower is total comp in Europe compared to the US? Note, it's a non-tech TPM data center construction and delivery. Martin, I'm really confused. TPMs are not non-technical, right? So like, and a data center manager role is different from a TPM role. So this is a little bit confusing to me. I need to have a little bit more data. And, when we're talking about Europe, it depends. If you're getting hired in Zurich, that's going to look more like a US salary. If you're getting hired in London, it's going to Dublin, Paris, it's going to be 40% less. If you're getting in Warsaw, it's going to be 70% less, right? So it really depends on the market. But I'm a little bit confused by the title changes because these are different roles. So I would want you to just do a little bit more exploration there. As a college student graduating next May, how can I put my best foot forward to be desired by companies like Google as a SWE? was told that big companies focus in on interview success rather than the resume. Um, so, Kirk, to stand out, I mean, ideally, if you can get some sort of maybe even like a winter internship, that can be really valuable. That would be something to consider. Any sort of internship or apprenticeship, any sort of like work experience along with education is going to be super valuable. Um, Even being willing to take on these roles like after graduation could also be helpful. I'm just looking. I was told big tech companies, I mean, yeah, like interview success is definitely going to be a big part of it. It's going to be more challenging to get hired as an entry level software engineer for the foreseeable future. They're just hiring less of those roles. So I really look at anybody who graduates but also has some applicable work experience. I think that's going to be a benefit. So any way you can take that on, but there's just going to be like less L3 SWE roles coming up, and it's significantly less now, and I think going into the future as well. I've seen a lot of TPMs and program managers get laid off. Is it still a good career to consider as a software dev team would still manage to operate without these roles? Um, I haven't seen that. So I'm not sure where that data is coming from. I don't want to say it's not true because I don't always have a great pulse. Like I only know I know the world within my own lens, and I think we can all admit like sometimes just kind of knowing that our lens is a little bit narrow. I just haven't seen a ton of program managers and technical program managers being laid off, and I would say that the software dev team cannot manage without them because if they're worried about timeline and budget and stakeholders and resources and risk on top of doing all the dev work, things are going to fall apart. Program managers and technical program managers are critical roles because they're bringing a lot of different people together. And so if dev was all of a sudden responsible for bringing in the product, bringing in other aspects of engineering, bringing in marketing, doing the long-term planning, I think that those would be some pretty upset devs because they'd be doing twice the amount of work. But I don't think that those roles are going to go away personally. Is it a good idea to request my recruiter for a mock interview for a senior SWE role? No. No, your recruiters. What some companies may be able to do is hook you up with a internal employee who can do it. So it is good to request that they put you in front of another employee if that's a program they have. So you can just ask, like Google has that program, for example. So you would definitely want to ask them for it. There's no negative; it's only a positive. I think I saw the question. They can't do it. They're not going to be technical enough, of course. And I just think recruiters aren't good interviewers. They're not. And that's just an honest moment that I experienced when I started doing interview coaching and I realized I had no idea what a good interview looked like. No clue. And I had been a recruiter for so long, I thought I just knew, and I didn't know. No question in this message, but thanks again for always giving time for the Q&A. See you soon. David, good to see you. Come back soon, please. Hunter, these lives are great. Learning from questions I wouldn't think to ask. Yeah, and I love that. That's the community-driven piece. This is why I love the YouTube community, the LinkedIn community. Is it all positive? No, it's not all positive all the time, but it's mostly positive, right? And so when we do community-based things like these lives, it's just a huge opportunity to connect with other people and yeah, see questions that you just probably wouldn't have considered. And sometimes the questions come through and I wouldn't have considered them either. Where in Europe we would be paid, where in Europe I'd be paid just as much as the States to work in tech as a research scientist in AI with about 6 years of experience. The only technical roles in across Europe that I've seen coming close to US based salaries is in Zurich. That's the closest I've seen. Every other market has been significantly less, especially when you look at the premium and premium plus markets in the US. The US is basically the best paying market for tech. There are some potential opportunities in like Singapore that can be pretty close, but mostly it's the US. The role is a data center services manager, construction and delivery, basically responsible for all the DC builds in a country. The TPM will be responsible for one of the new build outs in the country, reporting to the DCS manager. This role would be in the Netherlands. Okay. I mean, again, like it's just a little confusing on the messaging because the DC manager role and the TPM role are different. Even an L5 TPM role is going to pay probably more than an L6 DC manager role. So it's just, again, it's just a little confusing. You may want to get just a little bit more clarity on that, but it sounds like a good opportunity. Thank you for your valuable insights. What is the TC between the US and Europe? Again, it's really market dependent, but I would say, like in a big market like a London, Dublin, Paris, 40% less than the US on average. Also, many thanks for your videos. Got good feedback on all your interviews. Studied your videos. Awesome. Thanks for the positive feedback, Martin. And just keep it coming if you have questions. It's a little confusing what they're doing with you. I'm also debating transitioning into either a TPM or customer engineer role at Google. What should I consider while picking the best role moving forward? So it's a great question. I love TPM roles right now just because they're super hot. The comps are on the major uptick right now. So it's a great opportunity to get into a TPM role. I think there's lots of stability there. The thing about a CE role is that it's a sales incentive driven role. So the bonus target is 42.86%, but you can get up to like a 2.3 or a 230% push on that. So if you absolutely crushed it, the actual earnings potential for a CE is higher. It's more client facing. So do you want a more of an internal facing role or external facing role? I don't hear any CEs getting that 200% plus. I just haven't heard that at all. I heard that the trend right now for CEs is hitting about 80 to 90% of that target. Just the data that I have. Hey, Corey, coming in at the end. Always good to see you in the live. Just curious, when in your career did you know you just wanted to do something solo? What steps did you take in the initial stages? I think I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I think at the 3-year mark, I was at Google for about 5 years. At the 3-year mark, I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a recruiter anymore. It just wasn't really as interesting or exciting to me. So it was probably around 2016. And then the biggest items to consider for any entrepreneur, and we can keep this really simple because this could be a long tangent that goes on for an hour, but the number one piece for anybody who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur is, what is the financial plan? How are you financially planning? And a lot of people start with a side hustle, 90% plus start with a side hustle. But what is your financial plan? If you were to leave your job, how long can you go with making no money, right? Or how much money do you need to survive to pay for yourself or for your family or your children or your pets or your mortgage? The financial plan is number one. Second, and just as important, is how are you going to market it? So you got to have a financial plan, but then how are you going to market it? Most people are really good at doing the work, but they're terrible at the marketing part of it. And so financial planning and marketing, those are your two biggest areas. And then of course, the third one is, if you're going to do anything, you got to niche down. Being broad and providing something for everybody just simply doesn't work. So you got to niche down. But those first two items are critical. And by the way, I don't do any paid ads at all. My marketing is through online content. And I think that that's a great resource, whether you're a YouTuber or TikToker, or you love going on Instagram, you got to figure out a way to market your services, because you can have all the financial modeling done. You can have the perfect product, but if you don't know how to market it, it will never work. I hope that helps. What's the difference between CE and cloud solutions architect role at Google? A customer engineer, the biggest difference is an architect is always going to be at the architecture stage, right? Early stage. Whereas a customer engineer will come in multiple stages of the process, but the pay is going to be very similar, and they're both actually going to be sales incentivized, even the architect roles. So the real question is, do you like a lot of like the hands-on mix of technical and business working with clients, or are you a little bit more driven towards the technical side and building that upfront architecture? That would be the biggest question. They're both good roles, though. Thanks for keeping the lives going through these slow times and hanging out later than normal today. Yeah, and I'll do the lives as long as we keep getting questions, I'll go. And so sometimes they're an hour, sometimes we had one a couple weeks ago that was an hour and 45 minutes. I just hang out and stay. As long as people are willing to show up and ask questions, I'll hang out. Does Google help their employees gain skills and experience to transition to other roles within the company? Yes. There's an internal tool. I think it's probably still called Grow, but Grow is unbelievable. Like it's just this resource bank of all these workshops and trainings, and you'll be encouraged to do that. I think it's about, I don't know if they've changed the amount. In the US, it's like a $12,000 per year tuition reimbursement. Now that would have to be still close or similar, right? So maybe you're program manager and something and you're trying to move into a technical program manager role, or it could be a program manager trying to pivot over to product, but it's not going to be a leap from A to Z. They're going to support you if it's close enough to the role and benefiting the space. Meaning like if you're learning more about AI or ML, for example, that's going to be a huge benefit or something they might look at. Great advice, Jeff. Still in the early stages, but I have an entrepreneur itch. Love hearing about your journey because it tracks pretty similar. I can't say that word. I was writing a script yesterday and I was like, I can't say the word similarly. It's a difficult word. To how I feel about recruiting. Thanks again. Yeah, and I think Corey, like, let's state what nobody wants to say and what is just so apparent. Recruiting is a dying field and it will not exist in 5 years. It won't exist. And all the pushback against that, it's fear. It's fear-based. I believe AI will have such an impact that I think that my job will be irrelevant in a couple years, 2 or 3 years. I need to think that way as an entrepreneur. So, whatever you're tracking to do, how are you backing it with AI and technology to make sure that you're making good decisions for you, for your family, et cetera? Just important data points to be thinking about. If I transitioned into a TPM role from a research scientist role, would that require me to start at a lower level than where I'm at in my current career? Yeah, probably. It'd be a step down, right? But technical program managers, maybe a step down in level would still be the same comp as a research scientist. Now, research roles are pretty hot right now too, so it's hard to know. But yeah, likely like if you were an L4, L5, let's say you're an L5 research scientist at Google and you wanted to transition into a TPM role and it was a match, you'd probably go down to a level 4, for example. By the way, thanks so much for answering all of our questions. You are welcome. We are hitting the hour-and-a-half mark. I'm happy to hang out and answer any additional questions that come in. We're out of questions right now. I'm going to prompt on finishing out the live, but if more questions come in, we'll keep answering them. My name is Jeff H. Sipe. My business is practiceinterviews.com. I offer one-on-one interview and one-on-one negotiation coaching services, plus an interview mastery course. It's all available at practiceinterviews.com. I am in the early stages of development for an AI job interview practice tool. The price point's going to be super low. It is going to be killer. It's going to actually give you feedback on how to improve specific sections of your answer, something that none of the other tools are doing to date. And so I'm super excited about that. If you like what I did today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, 10 a.m. Pacific time every Tuesday, I go live, and new original content every Monday. I really think I'm probably not going to do a video next Monday because it's Labor Day here in the US, but I'll ultimately let the community know through the community tab on YouTube. we're out of questions. So thank you so much for being here. Come back next week. I'll be back next week. Take care and have a great day.